She was asked, loudly, in front of a room full of strangers, if she borrowed the boarding pass from someone who actually belongs in first class. Her only crime? Wearing the wrong skin tone with the right handbag. This isn't just another story about airport discrimination. This is what happens when the system thinks you're invisible, until it realizes too late that you're the one holding the switch. A woman, black, silent, dressed as a designer, ignored like luggage, labeled a problem, then a fraud, then a ghost. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was who she really was. And by the time they found out, the damage was irreversible. This story doesn't unfold gently. It detonates. Every insult, every denial, every calculated pause is a fuse, and she lets them burn until the final explosion shatters everything they thought they controlled. So don't scroll past this. Stay with us, because the moment you think you know how this ends is exactly where it turns. Which part shook you the most? Let us know in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe some systems need to break to be rebuilt, subscribe. This is just the beginning. The black Escalade rolled up in perfect silence, its engine hum barely breaking the hush of the Haven private terminal. The morning sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft, filtered glow on the brushed steel and smoked glass of the exclusive airport hub. It was a space designed for the elite CEOs, royalty, global financiers, and it moved like clockwork, precise and polished. As the car door opened, the driver stepped out and retrieved a single, jet-black suitcase from the trunk, handling it with care and deference. Then, the woman stepped out. Savannah Ellington didn't need to dress loudly to make a statement. She was a study in restraint and quiet power. Her tailored black suit curved elegantly around her frame, the silk shirt beneath it barely visible, but unmistakably high-end. The watch on her wrist, a subtle Patek with a mother-of-pearl face, glinted briefly in the light. Her hair was tied into a neat, low bun, revealing earrings that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. A single Hermes Kelly bag in crocodile leather swung gently from her arm. She moved like she belonged not just in this terminal, but in every room money had built. But money, she'd learned long ago, didn't always speak the same language when the skin wearing it was black. As she approached the main entrance, the glass doors slid open automatically. The scent of fresh linen and soft leather greeted her. A young man in a navy suit and headset looked up from behind the front desk, his eyes tracking her movements. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he stood straighter, forcing a tight smile. "Excuse me, miss," he called out, stepping forward before she reached the security archway. "This area is reserved for Haven elite clients. Staff use the service entrance on the west side." Savannah didn't stop walking until she stood directly in front of him. Calmly, she reached into her blazer and pulled out her boarding envelope. "I'm aware," she said smoothly, her tone neither confrontational nor defensive. "I'm flying Haven charter, flight HC 204 to Geneva." The man blinked. He took the envelope slowly, scanned the pass, and then glanced back at her. His smile didn't soften. "I see. One moment, please." He walked back behind the desk, whispering into his headset. Savannah waited, posture relaxed, but eyes sharp. She saw it then, the subtle body language of the staff shifting around her. A woman at the check-in counter looked over and immediately picked up a tablet. Two more associates leaned in to hear what the young man was saying. It wasn't protocol. It was suspicion dressed as procedure. A minute later, the man returned, handing her back the envelope. "You may proceed," he said flatly. "Security will do an additional ID verification inside." Savannah nodded once and walked forward. Inside, the terminal was nearly empty. A few travelers sipping espresso, one older couple being escorted to the private lounge. No one was being double-checked. No one else was being followed by staff eyes like a shadow. At the security checkpoint, a woman in a crisp black uniform looked up. She scanned Savannah's boarding pass, then her ID. Everything turned green. Still, she held the card in her hand for a beat too long. "Are you traveling alone today?" she asked. "I am." "Purpose of your trip?" "Private business." The woman paused, handed the ID back, and nodded toward the next station. "You're good." As Savannah walked away, she caught a glimpse of another attendant watching her from the side. A subtle headshake, a glance at her bag, the look that said, "You don't fit." She made her way to the private lounge and paused at the reception desk. A smiling attendant with blonde hair glanced up. "Welcome to Haven Premier," she chirped. "Name, please." "Savannah Ellington," she said, offering both a boarding pass and Diamond Plus card. The woman scanned both, then frowned. "I'm sorry," she said. "There must be a system error. Your access isn't showing. You might not qualify for lounge entry." Savannah didn't flinch. "I believe I do. That card grants full access." "Yes, but it's not linked in our system right now." The woman leaned in slightly. "Sometimes these things happen. Maybe check with membership services." A man in a tailored navy suit walked in behind Savannah and flashed his card. "Mr. Kaplan," the receptionist beamed. "Welcome back, sir. Would you like your usual corner seat?" Savannah stepped aside. She didn't argue. Not yet. She simply turned and walked toward the main seating area, choosing a bench near the glass wall overlooking the private runway. Her bag sat beside her, perfectly aligned with her shoes. She tapped her phone once. No messages. Good. Discretion was still intact. Then came the final insult. A woman across the terminal dropped her suitcase, one of those oversized aluminum types, and it tumbled toward the aisle. No one moved. Savannah, by instinct, stepped up, caught it, and guided it back upright. The staff member closest to her, watching from a nearby podium, muttered just loud enough, "Well, looks like she found her calling. Cleaning duty suits her." Savannah froze. Not visibly, just internally. Then she smiled a sharp, precise smile, and returned to her seat without saying a word. Because she wasn't here to argue. She was here to watch them bury themselves. The quiet hum of the lounge faded as Savannah approached the check-in counter. She moved with her usual poise, measured steps, shoulders relaxed, eyes scanning not with anxiety, but with clinical precision. The check-in desk was manned by a sharply dressed woman in her early 30s, eyes rimmed in expertly drawn liner, smile tight as a drawstring bag. The screen before her blinked with boarding schedules and manifest codes, its sterile glow casting faint shadows across her jawline. Savannah waited patiently, her black card and boarding pass already in hand. When the woman finally looked up, her gaze hit Savannah's face, then dropped, fast, to the name on the screen. Then came the pause. It wasn't long, maybe 2 seconds, but in those 2 seconds Savannah read everything. Doubt, evaluation, calculation. The woman took the boarding pass with 2 fingers like it might be wet, scanned it, then blinked at the screen. She muttered, then gave a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. She turned slightly toward her coworker, lowered her voice, then looked back at Savannah. "This is quite the ticket," she said, smile now curling into sarcasm. "Private charter to Geneva, full suite, exclusive tier." Her eyes flicked upward, resting on Savannah's face. "You don't see that often." Savannah kept her expression neutral, saying nothing, just waiting. The woman leaned in slightly, tilting her head, then dropped it, the line that always comes coated in polite poison. "Just curious, are you sure this is your reservation? I mean, not to offend, but most of our elite clients have assistants who handle their travel." Savannah's tone didn't waver. "I manage my own schedule." Her words were crisp, professional, clean. But it didn't matter. The woman's smile only sharpened. "Of course," she replied, still holding the pass. "It's just this kind of booking. Well, it's not typical. Sometimes guests borrow credentials from corporate clients. It happens. We have to be careful." There it was. Borrow. Not steal. Not fake. Just suggested illegitimacy. Framed gently enough to shield her from accountability, but acidic enough to corrode dignity. Before Savannah could respond, a man in a dove-gray Tom Ford suit walked up beside her. Tall, white, mid-40s. He handed over his pass with a nod. The attendant's posture changed immediately, eyes brightening, smile widening. "Mr. "Wentworth," she beamed. "We've been expecting you. Right this way." She stepped out from behind the counter, walked around it, and gestured toward the velvet-roped entrance to the private lounge. "May I take your bag for you?" she asked him, hands already reaching. He laughed warmly. "I'm all set." The two exchanged a chuckle like old friends. Then he walked past Savannah without even a glance. The woman returned to her post, tone flat again. "Now," she said, "I'll just need to verify your ID. Passport, government-issued photo ID, and if possible, company letter of verification for the charter booking." Savannah tilted her head. "You didn't ask him for any of that." "He's a known client," the woman answered quickly. "Long-standing history. With new guests. We need to double-confirm identity to protect all passengers." "So my face doesn't confirm it?" Savannah asked. "Just not enough," the woman replied. "Hope you understand." Savannah didn't argue. She pulled out her passport, her state-issued ID, and her corporate authorization card, not because she felt obligated, but because she had learned the art of disarming institutional arrogance through sheer overcompliance. The woman took them one by one, scanning each carefully, pausing long enough on the corporate card to raise an eyebrow, but not enough to comment. "We'll just need a moment," she said. As Savannah waited, a second employee walked over, whispering something in the attendant's ear. The first woman turned, muttered back, and both sets of eyes flicked toward Savannah again, this time with just a hint more scrutiny, as though she had done something, anything, that warranted it. Nothing she wore was out of place. Nothing she carried was improper. And yet she had triggered a silent protocol reserved for anomalies. Anomalies that didn't look like Mr. Wentworth. Behind her, a new traveler entered the terminal. Young, white earbuds in, hoodie zipped. He flashed his pass briefly at the desk. The second employee glanced at it, smiled, and waved him through without hesitation. No ID, no questions, no scan. Savannah didn't react. She watched, noted it, then turned her gaze forward again. The woman behind the counter handed her items back. "You're all set now," she said. "You can proceed to the waiting area. Lounge access will be pending final clearance from the charter staff." "Pending?" Savannah asked. "Yes, they'll need to confirm once pre-boarding begins. So I'm not allowed in the lounge until then?" "Just a few steps away," the woman smiled. "We appreciate your patience." Savannah stepped aside, heels clicking softly on the polished floor. She took a seat near the wide bay window, where the tarmac shimmered in the early sunlight. Her posture never shifted, back straight, shoulders set, hands folded over her lap. But beneath the stillness, the air was charged. Her phone buzzed once in her palm, an encrypted message from her executive assistant. "Final briefing doc uploaded. No changes from Zurich Legal. Good to proceed." She typed back a single word, "Received." From across the lounge, she could hear low laughter. Two staff members, one male, one female, whispering just beyond earshot. Occasionally, their eyes darted toward her. One made a subtle gesture, a hand wave meant to mimic a dramatic strut. The other laughed again, covering her mouth. They thought she couldn't hear. Or worse, they didn't care if she could. And still, Savannah sat. Because she wasn't there to make noise. She was there to remember. The hum of conversation in the waiting area ebbed and flowed like ocean waves, just loud enough to fill the silence, but quiet enough to keep the illusion of luxury intact. Savannah sat in her chair, back straight, eyes forward, one leg crossed elegantly over the other. Her phone remained face down on the side table beside her, next to a bottle of untouched sparkling water. Outside, the tarmac glowed under the mid-morning sun, jet trails slicing the pale blue sky in straight, efficient lines. She could hear the low buzz of luggage wheels, the occasional soft beep of boarding scanners, and the hushed tones of travelers who thought they were invisible. Across from her, two lounge employees stood behind a half wall near the espresso machine, partially obscured by a column of frosted glass. Savannah didn't need to see their mouths to understand the weight behind their glances. Every stolen look, every suppressed smirk was its own message. One of them, the same woman who had delayed Savannah's lounge access earlier, leaned in close to her male coworker and whispered something while flicking her eyes toward Savannah's seat. The man raised an eyebrow and with a stifled laugh, nodded. The woman grinned, then muttered under her breath just loud enough for it to ride the air like smoke. Some people really think wearing a suit makes them belong. Delusion is one hell of a drug. Savannah didn't flinch. She had heard worse. She had endured worse. But even silence has an echo, and that one resonated more than most. She knew what they thought. She knew what that sentence truly meant. You don't belong here. You're a costume. A shadow pretending to be someone it's not. She let the words settle into her spine, cataloged them like a mental ledger. It was never about the volume. It was about the intent. And this wasn't ignorance. It was designed. A few moments later, a woman in her 60s, struggling to juggle a bulky Louis Vuitton suitcase and a carry-on tote, stumbled slightly as the larger bag tipped sideways and collapsed to the polished floor with a loud metallic thud. Papers scattered from an unzipped side pouch, fluttering like oversized leaves across the aisle. Several travelers looked up, then immediately backed down, as though the inconvenience were contagious. No one moved, not even the staff. Savannah stood immediately. She walked over, crouched in one smooth motion, and began gathering the pages, some of them spreadsheets, others hand-marked itineraries, and stacked them into a neat pile before returning them to the side pouch. She righted the suitcase with one hand, her heels not clicking but gliding against the floor. The older woman looked up, flustered but grateful. "Thank you, dear. Thank you so much." Savannah nodded softly. "Of course," she replied. "No trouble at all." But trouble was never far when power was watching. From behind the lounge desk, one of the younger staff members, a man in a fitted vest and rolled-up sleeves, watched the interaction, then turned to the others and whispered in a tone drenched with derision, "Look at that. Starting where she's probably most familiar. Maybe that's how she got this far, valet work." Another laughed, adding, "Maybe she's here for a trial. See if she can serve espresso next." Savannah heard it. Of course she did. Her ears were trained to catch the things not meant to be heard. That was how institutional rot disguised itself, in shared glances, implied jokes, and socially acceptable sarcasm. She didn't respond, didn't show it. She simply walked back to her seat, hands clean, posture regal. Minutes passed. The older woman whom she'd helped was now sipping tea, unaware of the venom brewing in the lounge's quiet corners. The staff resumed their cycles, clearing trays, fluffing pillows, offering menus to everyone except Savannah. She remained untouched, as if her very presence disrupted the room's design symmetry. Her chair, though identical to the others, might as well have been made of different material. Less comfortable, less earned. At one point, another attendant approached a man seated 2 chairs down from Savannah. He wore a wrinkled blazer, scuffed leather shoes, and sported earbuds that dangled like forgotten ornaments. The attendant offered him a hot towel and asked if he wanted a complimentary cocktail while waiting. When he declined, she offered a wine list. Savannah was 3 feet away. She received nothing. Behind her, the whisper continued. "Did you see the way she picked up that bag? Graceful. She must have had years of experience. Maybe she was a porter before. The transition makes sense. I bet she knows how to polish shoes too. I should ask." Savannah remained still. Her expression never shifted, but her hands now clasped tighter in her lap. She didn't look up. Not yet. Because she wasn't done taking notes. The lounge had grown busier now, with more charter passengers arriving by the minute. Some escorted by staff, others settling in with practiced ease. The scent of roasted espresso and lemon oil polished floors blended with a low hum of international accents. Savannah remained seated in her corner, her presence a contradiction to the atmosphere around her. Elegance paired with eerie exclusion. Her phone buzzed softly again, an alert confirming the status of the Zurich transfer. Logistics aligned, timelines unchanged. She acknowledged the update with a flick of her thumb, then returned her attention to the lounge as a uniformed attendant approached pushing a food service cart, polished steel gleaming under the pendant lights. The attendant, a petite woman with neatly clipped hair and a pinned name tag that read Clara, was rolling her eyes before she even reached Savannah's section. She stopped a few feet short, scanned the clipboard in her hand, then glanced at Savannah, letting her gaze drop to the black Hermes Kelly bag resting neatly beside her chair. "Wow," Clara said under her breath, loud enough to be heard but soft enough to pretend it wasn't deliberate. "Haven't seen one of those in a while." Savannah looked up calmly. Clara wasn't smiling. She was smirking. "You know," she added, tilting her head, "that bag looks exactly like the kind they sell in Bangkok night markets. Knockoff stalls, 5-for-1 deals. But it fits. It's kinda cute in a way." She didn't wait for a response. Instead, she reached for the tray on her cart and began placing it on the table without eye contact. Savannah didn't speak, but her hand moved slowly to rest on the handle of the bag, not out of defense, out of ownership. Ownership of the truth behind every insult disguised as commentary. Clara adjusted the tray, her hands now busy with the covered dishes. "Let's see," she said, reading off the service sheet with mock importance. "Special dietary request. No shellfish, gluten-free, dairy-free." "Oh wow, that's the whole thing." Savannah replied evenly. "It's a medical restriction. I carry an EpiPen." Clara nodded dramatically. "Right. Of course. We totally respect that. Always." She peeled back the silver lid on the entree plate with a flourish, as though revealing a gift. The scent hit immediately, rich, briny, unmistakable. Savannah's eyes locked on the contents before the lid even dropped. Grilled lobster tail, nestled in a pool of buttery sauce, surrounded by blood cockles and scallops, garnished with fresh parsley. For a second, no one spoke. Then Clara raised an eyebrow. "Oh, that's weird. Kitchen must have gotten it wrong." Savannah didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. Clara leaned in just a bit. "Can't eat it, huh?" she said, tilting her chin toward the plate. "Santé, tôi tưởng quen đồ Tây rồi chứ. Lobster's about as first class as it gets." She chuckled, as if she'd just told a clever joke. Savannah stared at the dish, then at Clara, then back to the food. "Please remove it," she said. Clara didn't move right away. She glanced over her shoulder toward another staff member, exchanged a look, and then slowly gathered the plate, her motions exaggerated with passive resistance. "I'll let the kitchen know," she said. "Though next time, maybe include a medical certificate? Some of our guests do that. It helps avoid confusion." "That won't be necessary," Savannah replied. Her voice didn't crack, but it cut. Clara wheeled the cart away without apology, her whisper following her like a tail. "High-maintenance vibes on a discount seat. Got it." The moment stretched like taut thread. Across the lounge, another staffer caught the exchange from a distance and quickly averted her gaze. One of the newer travelers looked up briefly from their tablet, but didn't say a word. Savannah sat in silence again. Her hands returned to her lap. Her posture never wavered. Another 10 minutes passed. Then a soft clink of glass brought her attention to the far side of the lounge. A tall male passenger with a Rolex and a designer travel duffel had just received his second cocktail, served with a lime wedge and a folded linen napkin. Clara had delivered it herself. She laughed at something he said, playfully touched his shoulder, then walked back toward the prep area. As she passed Savannah's seat again, she slowed, pretending to check her list. "Still waiting on something?" she asked without looking. "Or just soaking up the view?" Savannah didn't reply, not with words. She merely turned her head slightly, made eye contact for a fraction of a second, just enough to register intent, then looked away. Her phone buzzed once more. Another update. Confirmation received. Haven Aviation. 87.6% capital under Ellington. Control via subsidiary holdings. Action window. 72 hours. She didn't type anything yet. She just let the weight of that message anchor her. She could have ended it now, could have made the call, could have collapsed the system with a sentence. But it wasn't time. Not yet. The scent of citrus oil in the air had begun to fade, replaced by the sterile sharpness of recycled air and overpolished steel. Savannah remained seated in the same chair, poised unreadable. But even grace had limits under a pattern of insult. The lounge, now fully occupied with mid-morning clientele, Executives in expensive sneakers, influencers in cashmere airport sets, older couples with matching luggage sets, hummed with selective hospitality. Waitstaff moved efficiently from one cluster of travelers to the next, offering Perrier, blood orange spritz, freshly steeped herbal tea. Trays passed from hand to hand with smiles and polite murmurs. None ever came near her. Savannah lifted her hand and pressed the service bell built into her armrest. The chime, discreet and gentle, rang once, inaudible to most but unmistakable to lounge staff. She waited. No one came. 10 minutes passed. She rang again. Still no one. 2 seats down. A man in a camel trench coat had just requested a glass of cucumber-infused mineral water. It arrived before he could even finish unfolding his newspaper. Across the aisle, a young couple requested lavender tonic. A waitress brought 2 chilled glasses with a napkin and said, "Enjoy, sir." Savannah pressed the bell a 3rd time. Clara passed directly in front of her with an empty tray. Their eyes met. Clara glanced at the indicator light blinking on Savannah's chair, then deliberately turned away. Savannah didn't flinch. But inside, something settled. It was no longer passive indifference. It was active omission. She was being excised from the experience, not because they forgot her, but because they had decided she wasn't worth remembering. After a 4th traveler received their 2nd drink, Savannah spoke softly, voice controlled but clear. "Excuse me," she said, to a passing attendant with an apron and polished shoes. "I'd like a glass of still water, please." The man stopped, blinked like he'd been caught off guard, then narrowed his eyes just slightly. "You didn't get any?" he asked, as if that were her fault. "No," Savannah replied. "I've requested it several times." He looked over her shoulder, as if checking for invisible verification. Then his expression hardened, the corners of his mouth drawing downward into a scowl. "Look," he said, voice lower but tinged with irritation. "We're not a full-service restaurant. If it's that urgent, there's a free water station outside the lounge near the vending machines. It's filtered. Same thing." The sentence hung in the air, louder than anything said before. Savannah blinked once. That was all. Not in shock, in recognition, in confirmation of what she already knew. Her status, her booking tier, her travel history. It didn't matter. In this room, she was seen not as an elite client, but as a disruption to a fantasy, a contradiction they didn't want to address. So they erased her by increments. The unserved drink, the unacknowledged call button, the refusal dressed up as policy. She glanced past him toward the others being served, smiling, sipping, completely unaware or perfectly content to pretend. She offered a single, tight nod. "Understood," she said. The man didn't respond. He turned and walked away, his steps brisk, dismissive. Savannah didn't watch him go. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small bottle of her own, glass sealed, labeled H+ hydration, an emergency reserve carried only on long-haul flights. She unscrewed the cap slowly, poured a small amount into the empty glass beside her, and took a sip. Not because she was thirsty, because she refused to let their denial shape her presence. Around her, the lounge returned to its rhythm, or rather, continued uninterrupted, because it had never paused for her in the first place. On the far side of the room, a pair of lounge managers were reviewing a tablet together, muttering in hushed tones. One of them pointed toward Savannah briefly, then retracted her hand. It was subtle, almost invisible, but Savannah caught it, the way animals feel storms before the clouds form. A code was being activated somewhere, a designation, a label. She picked up her phone again, this time not to check messages, not to respond to scheduling, but to scroll through the internal security protocol folder forwarded from Zurich 2 days earlier. The document was encrypted, available only to Ellington-level partners, and listed in detail how every major travel vendor processed tiered profiles, including behavior flags and discretionary suppression systems. Savannah skimmed until she found Haven Aviation. Her eyes locked on a line highlighted in red. In event of system-level non-recognition, staff may default to visual assumption until override is requested by client services. Visual assumption. That was the phrase, the professional term for coded profiling. It wasn't an accident. It was baked in. Behind her, another attendant passed with a cart filled with artisan pastries and ceramic teapots. Savannah didn't bother requesting anything. She didn't ring the bell again. She simply sat back, every fiber of her trained posture still intact. She wasn't thirsty anymore. She was focused. Because exclusion, when patterned long enough, becomes data. And data, when weaponized correctly, becomes destruction. And Savannah Ellington had built her entire empire on knowing exactly when to pull the trigger. The hum of luxury had returned to full volume. Coffee machines hissing softly behind the bar, low jazz pouring through hidden speakers, the clink of polished glass and manicured laughter echoing off curved ceilings. To the untrained eye, the Haven Elite Lounge remained an oasis of precision. But to Savannah, it was no longer just a lounge. It had transformed into a theater, one with tiered performances of power, decorum, and silent exclusion. She remained seated in her corner, composed, untouched, eyes fixed forward while everything around her moved as if she weren't there. Until finally, someone decided ignoring her wasn't enough. The lounge doors opened sharply with a hydraulic hiss. A tall man in a dark suit stepped through, his badge clipped prominently to the front of his lapel, radio coiled tightly against his collar. His name tag read Operations Lead Martin Creed. He didn't walk with the smooth elegance of a host. He walked with the calculated speed of enforcement. His shoes clicked across the tile floor as he scanned the lounge quickly, eyes locking on Savannah's position with immediate precision. Without pausing to consult the desk, without speaking to any staff members, he strode directly to the center of the room, raised one hand high above his shoulder, and addressed the entire lounge in a voice meant to command, not communicate. "Attention please," he announced, his tone booming with manufactured authority. "We are currently attempting to verify the identity of an unregistered individual found inside the Haven Elite VIP Lounge." Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze in midair. "If you are present in this space without a direct invitation or qualified booking," he continued, "we ask that you exit the premises immediately and report to the front desk for reclassification." His gaze drifted deliberately in Savannah's direction as he paused, allowing the weight of the accusation to thicken the air like fog. He didn't name her. He didn't have to. Everyone in the room knew who he meant. All eyes turned toward her now, some discreetly, others brazenly. A few pretended to continue their reading or phone scrolling, but even they glanced up through peripheral slits. Savannah felt the attention hit her body like a wave of heat, yet her expression never broke. Her hands remained folded. Her back remained straight. She turned her head slowly, just enough to face Martin Creed across the room, but said nothing. That silence, that calm refusal to justify her presence, somehow provoked more discomfort than if she'd shouted. A woman 2 rows down leaned toward her husband and whispered not quite quietly enough, "That's the one they were talking about earlier." The man responded under his breath, "Probably stole someone's pass. This is embarrassing for Haven. Should have caught her at the door." Another traveler, mid-40s, leaned back in his chair and muttered with theatrical disgust, "Next time they'll be sneaking into the cockpit." Huh? The joke earned a strained laugh from someone nearby. It spread like static, an awkward, complicit ripple of disdain. Savannah heard every word. She let them land. Martin took a few steps closer now, his tone tightening. "Ma'am," he said, addressing her directly for the first time, "do you have documentation verifying your access to this facility?" Savannah didn't rise. She didn't reach for her ID. Instead, she blinked once and replied, "You have it already. My boarding pass. My credentials. All were scanned and confirmed. Unless your systems have changed in the last hour." Martin hesitated. He hadn't expected a composed reply. He expected flustered confusion or immediate compliance. Instead, he found steel. "We've received reports," he said carefully now, "of a potential breach of protocol involving non-client access under false membership credentials." Savannah raised an eyebrow. "From whom?" Martin didn't answer. "Would you like me to name the employees who scanned my card?" or the timestamp on the lounge entry when I arrived. The room listened in absolute silence now. No one moved. Even Clara, hovering behind the bar, froze with a tray half wiped. The dynamic had shifted, just slightly, but enough to rattle the script. Martin cleared his throat. Until this is resolved, I'll need you to accompany me to the front desk for identity clarification. No, Savannah said, not loudly, but with finality. You'll resolve it from here. I'm not moving because your team decided to question the reality of a black woman in a tailored suit. That statement sliced through the air sharper than any insult could. A few jaws clenched. Others blinked rapidly. And yet Martin didn't retreat. He stood still, caught in the strange limbo between authority and exposure, between enforcing rules and realizing he may have become the evidence of what those rules protected. I'm not making this about race, ma'am, he said defensively. For the benefit of the audience, more than her. Savannah's voice remained ice. But your system already did. She leaned back in her chair, reclaiming space without standing. Behind her, someone whispered, "She's not wrong." It was faint. No one turned to see who said it. Martin's radio crackled once. He reached for his earpiece, pressed a finger to it, and turned slightly away. Savannah didn't need to hear the words to know the tone. Hesitation, confusion, likely someone higher up realizing something had been mishandled. Again, when he turned back, his voice was noticeably softer. We're going to run a secondary verification just to be thorough. Please remain where you are. Savannah smiled. Barely. It wasn't a triumph. It was confirmation. She didn't nod, didn't say thank you. She simply returned her gaze to the tarmac beyond the window, where a private aircraft had just begun taxiing onto the runway, glittering silver under the noon light. And from somewhere in her memory, a number flickered. The amount of Capital Haven Aviation had borrowed last quarter, and from whom. The silence that followed Martin's reluctant retreat pulsed like a held breath across the lounge. Guests cautiously resumed their conversations, but the air remained taut, as though something fundamental had shifted under their feet, something they couldn't yet name. Savannah stayed where she was, her gaze never wavering from the window. She didn't move like someone waiting for validation. She moved like someone measuring the precise second to detonate. And then, without warning, she reached down with practiced ease and unlatched the clasp on her Hermes bag. From the front pocket, she pulled a slender, leather-bound card case and laid it flat on the side table with a kind of finality reserved for courtroom exhibits and military orders. With 2 fingers, she slid a single card across the table surface until it faced outward. The platinum foil shimmered softly under the overhead light. Savannah Ellington Chair, Strategic Investments, Ellington Capital Holdings. The nearest staff member, Clara, caught the title first. Her body froze mid-step, tray still balanced in her left hand. Martin turned slightly at the movement, then spotted the card. His posture, until now upright and rehearsed, slumped by a degree. Not visibly enough for most to catch. But Savannah caught it. It was the moment authority remembered it had no leverage. One of the managers behind the front desk whispered to a junior associate, who immediately darted into the back office, panic riding in the twitch of his stride. Savannah didn't look at any of them. She took her phone from her coat pocket, not rushed, not defensive. She unlocked it with a thumbprint, tapped twice, and brought it to her ear. Her tone when she spoke was as calm and exact as a scalpel. Marcus, initiate immediate halt on the Haven Aviation Group loan cycle. Full freeze on the $420 million line. Reason code, breach of ethical compliance, client rights violation, and civil equity failure. She paused. The entire room went still. Yes. Effective immediately. Flag as high-risk investment. And Marcus? Ensure Ellington's exit from their commercial bond purchase program is completed before market close. Another pause. Good. Let's prepare a full audit release to stakeholders within the next 24 hours. I want the report titled clearly. Priority status isn't always performance-based. She ended the call and returned the phone to her lap, face down. No one dared speak. Across the lounge, Martin opened his mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. Clara placed her tray down quietly on the nearest empty table, then backed toward the kitchen doors without turning around. A ripple of motion passed through the staff like a silent fire alarm had gone off, an instinctual shuffle of guilt, fear, and confusion. Only Savannah remained perfectly still, her presence now fully, undeniably central. One of the male guests, who had previously made a snide comment about stolen passes, cleared his throat and adjusted his posture. His wife leaned closer, whispering frantically, "You said Haven Aviation was the Ellington-backed one, right?" He didn't answer. From behind the desk, the operations lead reappeared, now with a different tone altogether. His voice, moments ago sharp and public, was suddenly hushed and personal. "MS. Ellington," he began, "I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding regarding your profile." Savannah didn't bother looking at him. "You'll be fully escorted to our highest tier executive suite," he added, attempting a smile. "Complimentary services, of course, and we'll prepare a private gate shuttle for your departure." Savannah's reply was surgical. "I'm not interested in compensation," she said, "and I don't need an escort to claim a space I already paid for." Her voice wasn't raised, but each word struck with calibrated force. Martin tried again. "I assure you this isn't our standard," she cut him off. "You're correct. Your standard isn't the problem. Your culture is." He blinked. Behind her, two more staff members disappeared into the back room. Somewhere deep in the infrastructure of Haven Aviation's operational control, red alerts were beginning to sound, not alarms, but spreadsheet flags, withdrawal codes, access lockouts. Money didn't shout. It whispered through systems. And Savannah had just made sure every financial fiber that held this terminal together had been told. Disconnect. Her phone buzzed again. A message. Confirmation. Funds frozen. Audit initiated. Stakeholder alert in progress. She didn't smile. She didn't smirk. She simply lifted her chin half an inch. Then, she finally turned to Martin and asked, "Was there anything else you needed to verify?" He shook his head once, unable to speak. Savannah looked back toward the tarmac. Her jet was still scheduled to depart in exactly 1 hour. But the damage here, at this terminal, in this room, had already begun to unfold. Beneath the curated calm of the Haven Elite Lounge, a quiet tremor was already beginning to shake the foundations of the company above it. In the top floor of Haven Aviation's North American headquarters, nestled in a glass tower 30 minutes away, the office of CFO Gerald Lynn was lit by 3 wall-length monitors constantly cycling through financial dashboards, real-time credit risk assessments, and investor movement reports. The moment Savannah's command echoed through encrypted channels, the first notification appeared in red at the top right of Gerald's main screen. Alert, immediate freeze, Ellington Capital line of credit, $420 million, reason, priority protocol violation. Seconds later, his desk phone rang, then his personal cell. Then the emergency line was reserved only for capital partners. All 3 buzzed at once, vibrating across the desk like an impending earthquake. He grabbed the first line. "Lynn," he answered, breath sharp. "What the hell is this freeze code?" The voice on the other end was dry and surgical. "Sir, Ellington has initiated a risk flag. They've halted the drawdown schedule, citing an ethics breach." Also, Gerald cut in, "Who authorized that?" "No one. It's coming from the chair's channel." Savannah Ellington herself. His blood ran cold. He switched to the second call without pausing. "Lisa, pull up all open positions with Ellington. What's our exposure if this turns public?" Her voice was already tense. "Sir, we're leveraged across 3 divisions. Bonds, private debt, and the aircraft expansion deal. Total exposure, just north of $600 million if their partners pull out." "What do you mean if?" Gerald asked, already logging into the control system. "Because it's already started. 2 affiliate firms triggered conditional exits this morning. They're moving with Ellington." He dropped the phone. "Get everyone into the crisis room. Now." Across the city, in a sealed glass conference space known internally as Ops Central, emergency protocol was activated for the first time since the pandemic shutdown. Red folders with pre-printed financial war plans were yanked from drawers. Assistants scrambled to sync investor call lists. Screens across the room lit up with cascading damage reports. At the top of each, Ellington's strategic exit, initiated. Meanwhile, 8,000 miles away in Singapore, Haven Aviation's CEO, Bennett Harlow, was seated at a black marble conference table inside the Marina Bay Tower, finalizing the last clause of a joint venture agreement with a Southeast Asian logistics firm. His stylus hovered over the signature pad when his assistant burst into the room, tablet in hand, face white. "Sir, you need to see this. Now." He waved her off, annoyed. "We're closing a $1 billion deal, not reviewing catering complaints." She didn't move. "Sir, it's Ellington. They've pulled everything." He froze. She tapped the screen. The email preview read, subject: Investment termination notice, immediate effect sender. Strategic counsel, Ellington Capital Holdings. Bennett snatched the tablet and scrolled rapidly. The message was short, direct, unforgiving. Due to verified violations of human equity protocol and direct conflict with ethical standards outlined in Clause 4.6, Ellington Capital hereby terminates all financial relationships with Haven Aviation Group. This includes, but is not limited to, active capital injections, preferred vendor endorsements, and executive bond guarantees. This decision is final and irrevocable. He stood from the table, ignoring the stunned silence of the foreign delegates. "Get me Gerald. Now." But before the call could connect, his assistant's voice cut through again. "There's more. Sir, media." She tapped another link. A breaking news headline was already climbing financial media rankings. VIP lounge discrimination. Passenger removed. Identified as Ellington Capital chair. Below it, a 32-second video clip showed Savannah seated calmly as Haven staff surrounded her in what appeared to be a security intervention. The camera shook but caught everything. Her silence, their tone, and one whispered comment from a guest nearby. Probably stole someone's pass. The clip had over 600,000 views already and was spreading across platforms under the hashtag #EllingtonIgnored. Bennett's jaw locked. This just went global. His deputy CEO, who had been watching in silence, finally spoke. "We didn't just lose funding. We just lost credibility." Back at the terminal, Martin was still trying to keep his composure, but the silence from his earpiece was telling. Orders had stopped. Updates had stopped. The system had gone dark. Savannah remained seated, unaware of the chaos her single call had detonated. Or perhaps she knew. Perhaps she'd always known. In the lounge's back office, the assistant manager pulled up the real-time investor response dashboard. Ellington Capital's red withdrawal line blinked next to another investor tag. Nova Partnership Fund 63M pulled. Then another, and another. The list grew by the minute. Panic spread in silence, carried on notifications and unreadable spreadsheets. Clara peeked through the door and asked, "Should we be doing something?" No one answered her. And still Savannah sat in the same chair, now glowing with an eerie clarity, as if the air itself had adjusted around her to acknowledge what the staff never had. She glanced once toward the concierge desk, where Martin had made his announcement earlier. His clipboard was gone, his confidence too. Then her phone buzzed again, and she finally lifted it to read the next message. Savannah was still seated when Clara's shift ended. The once smirking lounge attendant didn't return to the floor with her usual tray or fake smile. Instead, she emerged from the staff corridor clutching a tote bag and a folded uniform shirt, her ponytail down, face pale and eyes red from what looked like an off-camera scolding. Her exit was quiet, no announcement, no confrontation, but the kind of quiet that screamed through implication. Staff around her avoided eye contact. Martin didn't acknowledge her. Clara simply walked toward the private service exit behind the kitchen and disappeared into a hallway that no longer welcomed her. Moments later, a new attendant entered from that same door, a young, maybe 22, pressed uniform slightly oversized but clean, and her energy different. She scanned the room briefly, then moved with cautious precision. When she passed Savannah, she paused just long enough to lean in and whisper, "I've been following your work since business school. Thank you for not staying silent." Her voice was low, sincere, untrembling. Savannah looked up and met her eyes, bright, sharp, and free of fear, and gave the faintest nod in return. The girl moved on, without waiting for approval. She didn't need it. She already knew where she stood. Across town, in a quieter wing of the Haven Aviation headquarters, the director of internal communications, Reese Dalmar, sat at her desk, rereading the emergency memo she had just been ordered to disseminate to all Haven properties within the next 30 minutes. The subject line read, Mandatory Immediate Staff RE Education, Phase 1. Client Equity Compliance. The body was worse. A full internal audit was underway. All lounge, flight, and concierge employees were to complete a 3-tier anti-discrimination protocol before resuming VIP-facing duties. Specific clauses included training on unconscious bias, nonverbal profiling, and most damning of all, corrective conduct for racially coded behavior. Reese closed her eyes, rubbing her temples. The sentence that caught her the most read, effective immediately. No staff member may make assumptions regarding passenger status, entitlement, or origin based on physical appearance, dialect, clothing, or perceived social status. A line buried near the bottom read like a confession. We failed to uphold basic human respect. And that failure was public. Reese hit send. Within the next 5 minutes, inboxes across the entire Haven global network pinged. Screens flashed. Lounge managers, flight supervisors, even regional leads stared at the same document and understood instantly. Someone very high up had forced this through. And worse, this wasn't optional. Back at the terminal, Savannah reached for her phone again. Another alert had just arrived, this time from her legal team. Media outlets requesting comments. We've prepared a no-statement response, per your directive. She nodded slightly to herself, appreciating that her silence carried more weight than any podium ever could. Near the concierge desk, Martin had finally abandoned his station. His earpiece still blinked, but no one was speaking into it. He had become a ghost of authority, a man whose clipboard no longer held power, whose posture no longer signaled control. He disappeared into the hallway where Clara had gone. Neither would be seen on the lounge floor again. Meanwhile, on internal staff messaging boards, anonymous comments had begun to appear, short, clipped reactions from employees across different airports. We all saw the footage. It's not the first time. She handled it with more grace than we deserve. If she hadn't been who she was, would anyone have believed her? About time this place got called out. I've served her once. She was kind. They were cruel. The system was cracking, not because of press, but because those within it were no longer afraid to speak. On the flight operations side, pilots received alerts that a private client manifest was being rear-reviewed for ethical flag risks. Language so bureaucratic it bordered on confession. One flight supervisor flagged their internal Slack channel with a message. Reminder, we're not paid to guess who belongs in a seat. We're paid to make sure the seat flies safely. Someone replied with a simple link to the headline, still climbing the front page. The chairwoman they tried to remove. Savannah remained still, her bag unopened, her water untouched. She watched staff rotate around her now with a deference so sudden it reeked of fear, not respect. The lounge had shifted. The guests didn't avoid looking at her anymore. They studied her, uncertain whether to offer apology, praise, or distance. She preferred the distance. It was cleaner. Her phone buzzed again, this time a direct message from her global operations liaison. It read, Zurich Dispatch confirms. Haven's name is now under pending review for all upcoming equity-based aviation partnerships. You've triggered 3 international clauses, full impact expected within 48 hours. She closed the message and locked her phone without reaction. And then she looked up as the lounge doors opened once more. The lounge doors parted once more, but this time there was no dramatic entrance, no announcement, no raised voice calling for verification. Instead, 2 Haven representatives in darker, more formal uniforms entered with an air of precision that didn't belong to customer service. It belonged to corporate strategy. They walked with purpose, not speed, parting the space between luxury and liability as effortlessly as if they had rehearsed this exact route. The taller of the 2, a woman with a badge that read Executive Services Director Harlow, paused a respectful distance from Savannah's seat and dipped her head slightly. "Ms. Ellington," she said, voice neutral but laced with tension. "Your private suite is prepared. We'll escort you now if you're ready." Savannah didn't stand immediately. She studied them with a gaze sharp enough to wound, but calm enough to read as dignified. Then, she rose slowly, adjusted her sleeve, picked up her bag, not with arrogance, but with finality, and followed. They didn't rush her. They matched her pace. No words were exchanged as they moved through the lounge, but the silence behind them was louder than any earlier insult. Every eye tracked her departure, not with suspicion anymore, but with the awe that comes only when people realize too late who they've been watching. They led her down a side corridor lined with privacy panels and soundproof glass. At the end stood a set of double doors, burnished with dark steel trim, and a small plaque etched in silver. Founders Hall, restricted access. The doors opened with a biometric scan and a manual key code. And for a brief moment, Savannah caught sight of something few ever had. A room so quiet, so carefully preserved, it felt like the center of gravity for the entire terminal. Rich walnut walls surrounded a single curved window facing the runway. A hand-woven rug from northern Italy stretched across the floor. A vintage decanter set sat untouched on a console under dim, ambient light. There was no sign-in sheet, no concierge, only legacy. "This space is reserved for our founding shareholders and senior equity executives," Harlow explained softly. "You're the third person to enter it in the last 10 years. Savannah didn't respond. She stepped forward, set her bag down gently on the tufted leather bench, and took a seat by the window. Her expression remained composed, but a trace of something else flickered at the corner of her mouth. Not amusement, not satisfaction. Understanding. The kind that only comes when systems bend not from protest, but from truth too large to ignore. Outside, her jet had been reassigned to Gate Z1, a gate designation used only for classified departures. The route to Geneva remained unchanged, but the path getting there now unfolded without resistance. Every clearance had been pre-approved, every procedural block removed. She no longer moved through the airport like a passenger. She moved like a perimeter, untouchable and quietly defended by the weight of her name. Elsewhere, terminals across the country began receiving the updated training packets, complete with simulated case studies, one of which included anonymized excerpts pulled directly from the Savannah Ellington incident, though no one dared label it as such. But within internal circles, the truth circulated. No redactions, no ambiguity. From finance to flight crew, the message was unmissable. Haven Aviation had been caught, outmaneuvered, and redefined by a woman they had not deemed worthy of a glass of water. At Haven's headquarters, the corporate bulletin board, an internal feed where only executive memos and high-level directives were typically shared, refreshed with a new banner. Just a single line, no logo, no signature. True lessons don't come from noise. They come from the silence of those who hold all the power. It wasn't signed, but everyone knew. No name was needed. In the Founders Hall, Savannah checked her watch. Her flight would board in exactly 20 minutes. A soft knock came at the door. Harlow returned briefly with a small envelope. "A formal apology from aboard," she said, "and a request. The CEO would like to speak with you before departure." Savannah accepted the envelope but didn't open it. She placed it on the table beside her and answered without emotion, "He'll need to wait until I land." Harlow hesitated, then nodded and exited. The room returned to silence. Savannah leaned back in her chair, legs crossed, her presence filling the room not with revenge, but with command. Not once did she raise her voice. Not once did she threaten. And yet, the entire infrastructure had bent to her presence like steel softened by fire. Not because she demanded it, but because she had proven, without drama, that she owned the matchbook. Outside, the last light of afternoon began casting gold over the tarmac, bathing her jet in quiet brilliance. Savannah watched it from behind the glass, not as a passenger preparing to leave, but as a woman who had just arrived at the moment her legacy took shape, not in noise, but in undeniable consequence. If this story challenged the way you see silence and power, consider subscribing for more narratives that reveal what happens behind closed doors. Which moment stood out to you the most, and why? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and tell us where in the world you're watching from.